Dreadford is a city ruled by vampires who live in its shadows. These vampires struggle for power, and two shades of darkness rise from this conflict. The court, which is filled by vampires who try their best to keep in touch with their human side, and the tower, which embraces the monster inside. In the dark, these two factions battle in secret wars for territory, blood, and gold. In the last century, the tower has been neutered by a weak leadership, and so the court holds most of the power in the city. But rumors of a new leader have sprung, and it seems they are ready for another battle. In recent nights, attacks have occurred in strategic places that disrupted the cash and blood flow of the court. In light of these events, Don Vittorio has made the security detail of his drug and arms enterprises stronger. One vampire from the tower will put this to the test.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
When he was investigating Sarah's case, it was alone. The host excused himself for a moment and came back with glasses of wine filled with blood.
Here.
He offered a glass to Daniel.
No, sir, thank you, but I would rather not.
Nonsense. This is an exquisite harvest from a great blood sommelier named Jean-Luc, a great friend of mine. This is art in a glass, unlike that dreaded industrial blood that comes from the rapture. Those kids have no taste. You will not regret it.
I don't drink human blood, sir. I must not accept.
Daniel refused, feeling embarrassed to his own surprise.
I understand, mon ami. I too hate the primitive task of biting necks. So out of taste, eh? We are not monsters,
he said in a supernaturally charming manner. Daniel felt as if he needed to fight for his will to prevail, but it didn't. He took the glass and drank. To his surprise, it tasted like nothing he ever tried before. He could not only taste how sweet it was, but he could taste happiness. The happiness mixed with surprise and excitement of being accepted to an Ivy League university. It tasted like graduating top of your class. It tasted like falling in love with a drop of a sunny day in the south of France. When he realized the glass was empty, and Dupont was looking at him satisfied, and for some reason, Daniel was happy to see him that way.
Now go, mon ami. Father Michael must be worried about you. Send my regards.
Daniel thanked for the drink and left, as if mesmerized, and when he closed the door, Dupont stared at his wrist. It was gnashed with a little blood. He made his wound heal, and a malicious smile grew on his face as he turned to the stairs to follow Jessica and the maid. The familiar started the car and rushed for the exit.
No! Stop! He needs help!
Julio screamed. The driver ignored his plea and Julio heard the doors of the car locking. He looked back to his sire and saw him kneeling, wounded. The huge man appeared to have endured his spells as easily as he had endured the gunshots, and had his hands over Hendrik. The last thing Julio saw before they departed the parking lot was his sire turning to ashes.
No one likes a hero.
Julio said to himself. Walking with a cane. started to bubble inside him, and he felt as if something ancient and evil was familiars keeping watch of the terrain. Moving in silence, Daniel passed by the familiar unnoticed through the right. Julio went through the left but stepped on an empty can, calling the familiar's attention, who caught him with a flashlight. But before he could make a sound, Daniel bit his neck, and the only sound was the familiar gargling and drowning in his own blood. Julio winced for a moment with the gore visual, but kept his head straight on the mission. When they got near the shed, they noticed 3 men on the entrance talking amongst themselves. Daniel got a rock from the ground and threw a couple of yards away, making a noise. 2 of the men got up to check the sound. Julio made his way to the remaining member and hit him in the head with a rock, and he immediately fell unconscious. The other 2 split to cover more ground, allowing Daniel to dispose of them discreetly with the butt of his gun. He came back and met Julio. They looked at the door and got in. A man held a gun to Christina's head, and both knew that he was not a familiar, but a vampire.
So the court sent you 2 to retrieve her. That's not gonna happen,
he said with a smile.
Leave her with us and we will let you walk out of here in one piece.
I'll have the hostage here, court scum. I call the shots. I can't believe you would risk an eternity for this bloodsack.
That's my wife!
A bloodsack for a wife? That's rich court hypocrisy at its best.
What do you mean?
I mean, I can smell Nosferatu blood in her mouth. She's on the juice.
Daniel looked disappointed at Julio.
No, impossible. I never did this. Mr. Blomkamp told me he would give her medicine. She has cancer.
Christina cried in silence, visibly terrorized, and the vampire from the tower started to laugh. A tear of blood struck Julio's face.
I did not know. Christina, I did not know.
You are disgusting.
Julio screamed in agony, pain and rage. His eyes were luminous and blood red as he set the clothes of his enemy on fire. Christina screamed bloody murder in fear. The vampire holding her hostage shot the gun to her head almost at point blank, and Daniel saw all of this in slow motion. He ran as fast as he could like an eagle diving for the kill, just in time to push Christina away, and so he would take the bullet for her instead. The vampire caught fire and turned to ashes. Christina fainted and Julio went for her.
We have to get her out of here.
Daniel agreed and they left. On the way back, inside Daniel's car, they were silent. Julio caressed Christina's face, bloody tears streaking his own. Daniel was silent. He thought about biting the neck of the man in the junkyard, about the familiar Julio had killed by mistake, about Christina surviving cancer on vampiric blood. What kind of fresh new hell was he living? Was all of this worth it to avoid death? Maybe not. Maybe Sarah O'Connor was the lucky one. In a clearing inside Dreadford's National Forest, the rancher slowly paced from one side to the other, with his hands joined behind his back. In front of him, Mud, his second in command, gave a speech.
Can you see how this can benefit our house? If we can use this process to make the blood of the cattle as sustaining for us as human blood, we can keep all our feeding and resources in-house. This is why this enterprise is so important for House Volkos. Now I know many among you think this is not our way, the way of the wolf, the way of the berserker, but these are not the Viking knights anymore. Those are long gone. We must adapt or perish. This is the way of our forefathers. Survival.
The Nosferatu of House Volkos huddled around the King's Council member and his representative in the dark. No torches were needed for them to comfortably see their leader. All but one kept silent, a young Navajo woman called Eloise.
Drink blood from cows? We are the House of the Wolf. We are born to hunt, not to raise cattle. Nature gives us what we need and we take it. This is the way of the wolf.
Some members raised their voices in agreement.
Our house numbers are the smallest it's ever been, and instead of fighting for the rights to expand it, we are going to pretend we are farmers? No, we are hunters.
More Nosferatu raised their voices in agreement, and the red eyes of the rancher silently gazed upon his opposition. A couple of days later, on the other side of the city, Father Michael met with Daniel Reed at his church.
Daniel, my son, I hope you are better after what has transpired with your last assignment.
Believe it or not, I think I am starting to get used to it.
Father Michael noticed that Daniel did not push back on being referred to as a son. Maybe the young vampire was starting to understand his place.
Well, that's great to hear it, because I have another assignment for you.
He said with a wicked smile.
As I said before, Van Arden and the rancher have the casting votes in the council. Van Arden owes us a favor thanks to your success in retrieving his grandchild. Now we need to bring the rancher to our side so we can use the full weight of the court against Yelena and finish her.
Let me guess. The rancher needs help to find a lost calf.
In a way. He needs our help to find a murderer. Usually this would fall under the purview of Shire Reaver Bartholomew, who is despised by all. But the rancher prefers to deal with this with the utmost discretion. Not only he has a special disdain for the Reaver, but he also doesn't want the fact that a family member murdered another to get out. So having heard of your exploits, he came to me for help. I knew I could expect great things from you when we met.
Daniel felt the last remark to sting, but Father Michael continued.
You are to locate this young Nosferatu called Eloise and take her to this address alive, where you will be thoroughly compensated. You should go there first and speak to a man called Elijah. When the assignment is done, we will finally have the means to get rid of Yelena and her ilk.
The priest gave him a photo of Eloise and a note with the address. A car parked in front of the church, and both Nosferatu saw the driver exiting the vehicle and opening the back door for Julio, who came out supported by his cane.
Hello, Julio. How is Van Arden?
Father Michael. He's well, thank you for asking. Do you mind if I have a word with Daniel in private?
Well, of course. It is good to see him making friends. Let me give you some space. Daniel, remember what we talked about.
The priest departed to the inside of the church, leaving them alone.
If you want privacy, we better leave. The old man has a hell of a hearing.
Julio looked to the doors of the church.
Of course. Come. Whatever are your errands, my driver can take us.
Daniel was puzzled by the choice of words, but followed Julio into the vehicle. The driver opened the doors for them, made way to his seat, and they departed into the night.
Thank you for the opportunity, Daniel. First of all, here, your commission. Van Arden sends his regards.
Daniel thanked him and put the pouch away inside his trench coat.
Now on a more personal note, I'd like to thank you for your help in saving Christina. I do not know what I would do if I had lost her. She's the love of my life, and I sacrificed so much for her. So in a way, you did not just save her, you saved me as well. In light of these events, I want to put myself and my resources at your disposal, whatever you need.
You don't owe me anything, Julio. I did what any decent human being would.
Yes, but we are no longer human. Therefore, you went above and beyond duty, and I insist that you accept my offer. I insist.
Daniel looked in Julio's direction, but did not respond. He shifted in his seat and gave the note with the address to the driver.
This is where we need to go.
Julio smiled in response. The driver took note of the address and answered affirmatively. Daniel explained the assignment as they drove through the city. After a while, they were in the outskirts, a more rural area composed mainly of ranches. The area was eerie and fog-enshrouded. The wind moaned like a cursed siren, and it was cold as an indifferent lover. Finally, the car made its way through a gate decorated with a ranch entrance sign that read ominously, "Nightmare Stables," surrounded by crows perched on top of it and at the sides.
Where the hell are we?
Julio asked nervously, noticing that some of the birds were following the car at a distance.
Haven't you read the sign? We're in a nightmare.
The car made its way to the front of a house, where there was an old man, bare feet, waiting for them. Both Nosferatu exited the vehicle, and the farmer greeted them.
Howdy, folks. I'm Elijah. Pleased to meet you.
He extended his dirty hands, fingernails colored black from a mass that resided underneath it.
Hello, I am Daniel Reed, and this is my associate Julio. We are here to help with the case.
Daniel shook the man's hand and took notice of the dirt.
Well, of course you are. Come in, I'm Elijah.
The farmer welcomed them into the house, where a malnourished man offered to take their coats. Daniel noticed his neck was filled with bite marks, some fresh, others badly healed, surrounded by many scars. He analyzed the man from head to toe and noticed the same wounds on his hands, arms, and even feet, because he was barefoot as the host.
I see you noticed, Jacob. If you want anything to drink, just tell him and he will oblige.
Jacob started to offer his neck, but Daniel and Julio were quick to refuse with hand gestures and head movements.
No thank you, it won't be necessary.
Well, you wouldn't mind if I took a sip myself, would you?
Elijah smiled in a wicked manner. His fangs grew, and he was ready to bite Jacob when Daniel interfered.
We are here for business, not pleasure. If you don't mind, we have other important matters to attend to.
Elijah felt displeased. His face betrayed resentment, but acquiesced.
Of course, let's make this quick then. Yeah, I do some cattle work for the rancher in this here stable. The work is secret, but let's say it doesn't sit well with some folks in our house. We had a presentation some nights ago, and these folks got hella mad at us and would not shut the hell up about it. So, the rancher called it a night and dispersed the gathering. On the next night, Mud, his second in command, got destroyed. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And we know who done it. This broad called Eloise.
And how do you know it was her, Mr. Elijah?
The farmer spat a brown goo on the floor of the house, and some of it hung from his chin.
'Cause the crazy broad skipped town and she was the one who was making a fuss out of the cattle work. Now, she's missing, and no one can find her, and I'm the one who has to clean it up now that Mud's gone. So the rancher wants you to find and bring her back for punishment, without anyone outside our house getting to know about this.
Of course, and why is Mr. Rancher not here to help?
Because he has more important business to attend to. Council business.
He spat again on the floor.
I see.
Daniel took note of the information in his notepad.
Well, you can talk to Nayati. She is the rancher's younger sister, and she is Eloise's sire. She lives in the reservation just on the outskirts of the city.
Yeah, I should. Thanks for your help, Mr. Elijah. We'll see ourselves out.
They got in the car and left.
Did you notice the familiar?
Yeah, I did. That was sketchy. Can he do that?
Treat him that way? I would think so. But it does not make it right.
It is very wrong.
Daniel looked backwards, and he thought he saw a shadowy figure on the side of the road.
What is it?
I don't know.
They took a while to get to the reservation. They parked and got out of the car.
How are we gonna find her?
She will find us.
They waited by the car for a little while when a young man approached them, asking to be followed. He took them into the forest and they walked until they reached a clearing where Nayati was waiting for them.
We shoot people for a lot less.
I've been shot for less.
The woman smiled. The detective could feel she was old. Her eyes were wise, but she looked like a young woman.
Did you deserve it?
I like to think I didn't, but maybe I did.
He smiled and she chuckled.
So, my brother hired you to find my daughter.
He did. You don't think she is guilty?
She's not that type of person. That's why I chose her.
It would be easier to prove her innocent if I found her.
My brother is a powerful Nosferatu, and Eloise was making things difficult for him. She has always been a firecracker, that one, but not a murderer.
Skipping town doesn't help her case.
I know. Help her, Daniel, and I promise to pay you back.
Where can we find her?
She is in the desert, after Skinwalker Peak. That's where she goes when she wants to get away from the world.
So it's a dead end. We can't possibly survive in the desert.
There is a Nosferatu who can help. Jerome, the Drifter. He knows that desert like the palm of his hands. If anyone can guide you and help you find her, it's him. Wait by the Hellmouth Tunnel. I'll send him your way.
Daniel and Julio bid her farewell and departed. As they cruised for the road, Daniel noticed the dark figure again.
Stop the car!
The driver pushed on the brakes, making the tire screech. Daniel got out of the car, followed by Julio, and the driver, who immediately drew an Uzi and took a defensive position. Quiet steps could be heard until the dark figure of a man stepped into the lights of the car. Dust lifted from the ground and the place was dead quiet. Not a cricket could be heard. Daniel drew his stake and Julio lifted his cane.
Who are you, and why do you follow us?
The figure stepped in their direction, and the headlights revealed a Native American man wearing leather boots, vest and pants made of jeans. He carried a hunting bow in his hand and arrows on his back.
My name is Cochise and you are Daniel Reed. We are enemies.
I don't know you. How can we be enemies?
I work with Yelena.
Silence hung for a moment.
What does she want?
She wants you to know that your eternity is at risk, that you are working for the wrong people.
Thanks, but I choose who to work for.
Choose wisely. Start by leaving Eloise alone.
Why would I do that?
She's innocent.
How would you know? Did you kill Mud?
Of course not. My father lost his way, but I would never kill one of ours because of politics.
I believe you, but I have a job to do anyway. If she is innocent, we will help her prove it.
But I don't believe you.
Cochise drew an arrow and fired against Daniel Reed in a lightning motion, too fast for him to realize he needed to dodge. The arrow flew with a whistle, landing on his heart. The detective fell to the ground, paralyzed. With blurry vision, he saw a scuffle and heard shots fired. Julio reached him, trying to take the arrow off, but it broke, leaving the point inside Daniel, making it almost impossible to remove. Cochise endured the shots from the Uzi and in a swift motion cut the throat of Julio's driver with a hatchet. The man fell to the ground, and Cochise was coming for Julio. He drew another arrow and pointed to the magician's back, where his heart would be as well.
Maybe Yelena can put some sense into you both.
Julio turned, pointing his cane to his attacker, and his clothes were set on fire. The archer dropped to the ground rolling, giving time for Julio to put Daniel in the car and leave. After the fire was put out, Cochise stood up. Amazingly, his body was scorched, but he resisted the fire, unlike other vampires. He saw the car disappearing into the darkness, one thought alone in his mind. This was far from over. Julio drove as fast as he could. The body of Daniel Reed laid inert in the back seat of the car like a corpse. If the cops stopped him, it would be very hard to explain the dead body. For his luck, the outskirts were deserted, and he soon got to the tunnel. There he saw a man with long blonde hair wearing a grimy white shirt, underneath a trench coat with a bag at his side that hung from his shoulders. He wore aviator glasses and looked very rough. He approached the car as Julio parked it.
Are you Daniel Reed?
The blonde man asked when Julio exited the car.
No, but I have him with me. Please help.
The man made his way and helped Julio take Daniel out of the car.
What happened?
Another vampire shot an arrow through his heart. I tried to remove it, but the tip got stuck.
Jerome ripped Daniel's shirt, and his hand turned into claws. He used them to cut to the detective's heart and removed the metal tip of the arrow. Daniel rose screaming, his wound still open. Jerome offered him a canteen, and the detective started to drink as soon as he felt the smell coming from it. The blood nurtured his dead body and filled it with stolen life. While he drank, the wound healed supernaturally. Jerome stood, giving the detective some space. Daniel stood up and cleaned himself the best he could.
Are you okay?
Yeah, sure.
Jerome laughed a little and asked,
So, you are looking for Eloise?
The question brought Daniel back to the present situation.
Yeah. The rancher hired me to find and bring her back.
Nayati told me you were going to prove her innocent.
I can do both.
Can you now? All right, Mr. Reed. I'll help you, but you better do as you promise or you will find a great foe in Nayati.
Now tell me something I don't already know.
The drifter took one good look at Daniel and Julio. These were young Nosferatu, but they were meddling in deep waters. He knew something was at play here, but kept to himself. He gave a long whistle and a falcon dove, resting on his arm. He stared into the creature's eyes for a second and gave it a pat. The animal took flight and went away.
Okay, Hemingway will scout for us as we prepare. You guys are gonna need a van in case we need to spend time in the desert. We are also gonna need blood reserves because feeding is very hard out there, especially for city folks like you. Remember to count Eloise as well when separating the supplies.
I'll arrange for that.
Great, so let's make the preparations as we wait.
As time went by, Julio was able to get an RV for transportation, and they modified it so no sun could bleed in during the day. It would comfortably fit all four of them, and another familiar for protection during their sleep. He also acquired enough blood for a 3-night trip for all of them. As they prepared for the trip, Julio told Daniel how Jerome removed the tip of the arrow from his heart, giving him some pause. Hemingway, the falcon, came back and apparently gave Jerome instructions for where to look for Eloise, and they departed. Cruising the desert was hard. Blood had to be rationed and they felt really exposed during the day. There was a close call when a state trooper stopped to ask questions about their business. The familiar was caught off guard when the trooper asked to see the inside of the RV, but Jerome had thought ahead and told them to rest underneath the beds precisely for cases like this. It took them some hours for the modification, but it was worth it. When the trooper saw it was empty, he asked about drugs, and the familiar promptly answered he could wait for a narcotic detection dog. He was so confident in the response that the state trooper left. Near sunrise on the second day, Jerome and Hemingway were scouting looking for tracks when they finally found it. The three Nosferatu followed the trail, and they came into an abandoned gas station. They looked for her, but no sign.
We should go. Sun will rise any time soon.
No, she's here. I can feel it.
How would you know?
Daniel, we should listen to him. We can continue tomorrow.
No. If we sleep, she will move again. She knows we are onto her. It needs to be now. Tomorrow we are going to have to go back to the city for supplies and the trail will get colder.
Daniel, listen to me. We are going to get weaker and weaker as the sun rises. It's too risky. We gotta go to sleep.
No! We'll find her now!
His eyes were blood red now.
If we get weaker, she will get weaker too!
Their discussion was interrupted.
Sir, I found something.
The familiar said as he came out from the bathroom. In a swift but violent motion, he was dragged back screaming. All three Nosferatu ran, and when they went in, they saw Eloise at his back, her mouth drenched in blood and his neck bitten. She was low, growling at them like a cornered animal.
Eloise, it's me, Jerome.
The woman was nervous and behaving in a feral manner. Her survival instincts were driven to the highest levels. She looked like she could bolt through the wall at any moment.
Did he send you to get me?
Daniel took a step further with his hands in an appeasing gesture, exuding his supernatural charm as he did.
Eloise, my name is Daniel Reed. I was the one sent here to bring you back, but I want to help you. If you tell me what happened, I can help you clear your name.
Julio was with his cane at the ready in case the woman decided to attack Daniel. He already felt guilty for letting the detective get his heart pierced by an arrow. It would not happen again, even if he had to burn Eloise into a crisp. Eloise released the familiar, who got away from her as fast as he could. Danielle's powers seemed to be working on her. She looked more calm now.
I did not destroy Mud. We argued after our gathering, but when I left, he was still walking. I heard him talking to someone after me, but I don't know who.
So you were not the last one to see him? Okay, so we need to find out who it was, and I have an idea. Please, come back with us.
Are you mad? I am going to be destroyed as soon as I return, and for a crime I did not commit.
Eloise, if you get away from us, others will be sent after you. It is either solving this by running forever, dying, or giving me the opportunity to clear your name.
The woman was confused. She didn't trust that the rancher would give her a fair chance, but at the same time she trusted Daniel, and she did not know why. She looked at Jerome, and Nayati always trusted him. She was so confused. Maybe she could get to another city. It was so close. But what if the Marcus sent for her in the name of the Reaver? Daniel's words were making more and more sense.
Okay, Daniel. I can't run forever.
They got back into the RV shortly before the sun rose. The familiar refilled the vehicle with gasoline they brought along, and they departed back to the city. He parked the RV roadside before entering the city and waited for his masters to awake. When they did, they fed and made the preparations for the meeting at the Nightmare Stables. They were the last ones to arrive at the appointed place. The rancher, Nayati, and Elijah were there already.
So you sons of bitches done it.
Not so fast, Elijah.
Jerome intervened.
The detective has something to say before handing Eloise.
Nayati had an air of relief in her face, but the rancher's face hardened.
He ain't have nothing to say, Jerome. His job was to find and deliver, not investigate.
You would like that, wouldn't you?
What's that supposed to mean, boy?
It means you did it, Elijah.
You have no proof.
Not with me, but you have. When we met, I noticed you had a black mass accumulated in your nails. I thought none of it, and chalk it down to extremely bad hygiene. But soon I found out that many of your house can grow your hands into claws. Eloise also told me that she can't, and that she was not the last person to see Mud walking. And you? Well, you inherited his position. Cui bono? Who benefits? Eloise, who could lose her eternity and slow her uncle's plans a bit. Or you, who could elevate your status and get rid of a roadblock inside your house in a single stroke.
All eyes were at Elijah.
It's not true. I would never go against a brother of the house.
Yes, you would. Not only that, but you wanted us to know because you were a psychopath. You wanted to parade Mud's blood on your fingernails in front of all of us like a joke that only you knew the punchline. The same way you parade the marks of your teeth on Jacob's body for all to see. You love to think you are smarter than everyone else while playing dumb, you sick, demented son of a bitch. You wanted to be smart enough to fool all of us, including the rancher.
It's not true, my lord. You must believe me.
The rancher and Nayati were quiet.
If it is a lie, you won't be bothered to let us test what's in your fingernails. Julio here is a very talented blood magician.
Elijah tried to flee, but Nayati got on his way.
You are gonna burn for this.
She looked at the rancher, and with a nod, he authorized the deed. Nayati ripped through Elijah, mercilessly displaying her brutal power, the power of the wolf. The rancher would square this with the council, and no harm would come to her. Daniel was astounded by the violence and thanked for belonging to the House of the Eagle. He hoped that in his house things were settled differently. Julio was unsettled as well, but figured that burning to ashes would not be a better fate. When all was done, she and Eloise went to Daniel and Julio.
Thank you both for saving my daughter. If you need anything, you know where to find me.
Thank you. If your crew needs a bruiser, you can count on me.
I think we could use a bruiser, Daniel.
Yes, I think we can work something out.
They left the nightmare stables under the vigilant gaze of Koshisa. Jerome walked up to him and stood by his side.
You are going to leave him alone now?
No, Yelena has plans for them.
Jerome smiled and left. He went back to the desert where the night was harsh and unforgiving, but easier than the web of intrigues of the politics of the wretched city of Dreadford. In the barren lands of the desert, the drifter made his home away from the world. Ivan and Antoinette arrived at a large underground space. It was a forgotten part of the Dreadford subway that was abandoned a long time ago. It had plenty of sitting spots and a pulpit. A large pool full of blood was the centerpiece, and a large standing mirror decorated the back of the space overseeing it all. The entire place was illuminated by a reddish light. At a table, the woman picked up a violin which she toyed with, tuning it by ear.
At last we are done with our task. It really did not feel so important as to take the two of us to complete it. Any group of newborns could have defeated that sorcerer. We did not need two archons. He was a fool, and that child of his was not worthy of much attention.
No task is too low for our cause, Antoinette, for our mission is pure, and we must give it our hearts and minds. The sorcerer was strong and he had to die. But our mission was not only one of reaping.
Ivan, you are too lenient if you feel your time is not better spent on matters other than kidnapping women and murdering cretins.
You are powerful, Antoinette. Very powerful. I do not remember a Nosferatu like you at such a young age. It's not been long since you received the gift of Babylon.
I am a child of the progenitor of my house. He was the very first of his blood to arrive here in Dreadford. One of the Nosferatu who instituted the tower in this city.
I know, my dear. I was there and saw it all happen. Those were promising times. The word of the founders being brought into the new world. But tell me, where is he now?
The woman remained in silence.
You lost your sire too early. You know little about our history and purpose. Despite your power, you lack experience. I have some time now before my assignment with Akasha. Please, if you will, sit and let me tell you a tale.
Ivan said while sitting and waiting for the woman. Antoinette stared at him for a few seconds and put her violin on a nearby table before she sat near Ivan. The preacher began by quoting the Book of Enoch by heart.
And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness. And they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways. Semyaza taught enchantments and root cuttings, Armaros the resolving of enchantments, Parakijal astrology, Kokabel the constellations, Ezekiel the knowledge of the clouds, Arakiel the signs of the earth, Shamsiel the signs of the sun, and Sariel the curse of the moon. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven.
Antoinette paid attention to the names of the angels, their divine ancestors, as it was taught inside the tower. She also knew their fate for such transgressions.
And on the day of the great judgment he shall be cast into the fire, and heal the earth which the angels have corrupted, and proclaim the healing of the earth, that they may heal the plague, and that all the children of men may not perish through all the secret things that the Watchers have disclosed and have taught their sons. And the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel.
After quoting the book demonstrating his intimate knowledge with the sacred texts, Ivan moved to his sermon.
The Book of Enoch tells us about the Watchers, angels sent from heaven to guard over humanity. Eventually, these Watchers fell into temptation and sinned. They had offspring with the daughters of men, the Nephilim. The books spill a lot of ink into those who are descended from a mortal woman, but we came from another group. The Watchers also practiced secret arts and magic. They used their heavenly knowledge to make experiments with the very nature of the beasts of this world. One of these experiments was to mix the blood of earthly creatures with their own angelic blood, creating monsters that populated the legends of men to this very day. They created hybrids, mortal beasts with heavenly origin. Our Nephilim receive just a single throwaway line on the books and are rapidly forgotten. It suits us. It keeps mortals oblivious to our nature and to our affairs. The miracle of our conception happened in old Babylon, where the first vampire emerged. The first one of our kind was the founder of House Dracul, Tiamat. She was a queen and student of the arts of Samyaza, the angel who taught sorcery to mankind. Through years of study, she realized that by using the sacred blood of the angels, she could not only live forever but acquire immense power from it. But the Watchers were sent to a hole underneath the desert, punished by God. The only angelical blood that remained on earth coursed through the veins of giants and eldritch beasts. The giants on those days were very rare, but the beasts terrorized the outskirts of Babylon ferociously. A dragon burned villages, a dire wolf stalked the plains, a giant sea serpent sunk ships, among many others. Their legends live to this day in one shape or another. She led a cult of men and women to bring back the blood and heart of the dragon. Many thought it an impossible accomplishment, but they succeeded. In a ceremony at night, the queen ate the heart of the beast and requested to be exsanguinated. instructing her peers to pour the blood of the dragon in her mouth when she had no more human blood inside her, during a specific ritual she had developed. They agreed and followed her instructions, and when the angelic blood coursed through her body, she woke again, transformed. The merging of mortal and Nephilim into one came with unexpected results, for their spirits were cursed to hunger and thirst, but were not able to take food. We came from the blood, and blood was the only thing that could satiate our kind. That is why our appetite for it is boundless. Soon, the other members of the party repeated the process, because now they coveted something more precious than gold: immortality. The legend says as such: a queen and a dragon became the founder of House Dracul. A nobleman and a snake became the founder of House Basilisk. A hunter and a wolf became the founder of House Volkos. A wise man and the owl became the founder of House Ashkari. A seductress and the eagle became the founder of House Strix. A criminal and a bat became the founder of House Orlok. A prophetess and a raven became the founder of House Morrigan. A magistrate and a spider became the founder of House Moroi. A diplomat and a black cat became the founder of House Pantera. A warrior and a sea serpent became the founder of House Leviathan. Each one of them was a mortal who managed to merge with one of the Nephilim. Soon they made Babylon into their domain and delivered the gift of Babylon to those who were worthy. Together, they created Nosferatu Utopia. Later, through trickery and deceit, another founder emerged. A warlock and a scorpion became the founder of House Sirkala, and he opposed all the other founders. Their struggle is the stuff of legends, and that age is considered our pinnacle by all of us. The golden age of the Nosferatu. The crowning achievement of these times was supposed to be the Tower of Babel. Its construction started under the auspices of our founders, but unfortunately it was never finished. Catastrophe struck Babylon and the tower was lost. Our entire kind was embroiled into dark, tumultuous events, and Nosferatu were spread far and wide to the corners of the earth. They mixed with distant mortal peoples and cultures, and our founders were lost to us. For 100 years after the fall of the Tower of Babel, chaos and destruction plagued our kind, and few of us managed to escape it. Nosferatu numbers dwindled, and after just a century there were very few left who had seen the days of Babel and the founders. If the Tower of Babel was not meant to be physically completed, our kind would at least achieve it in spirit. In 2091 BC, a huge gathering of Nosferatu first established an alliance and order which received its name in homage to Babylon. This is when the tower began. A gathering of single-minded Nosferatu with the intent to rebuild what was lost with the Tower of Babel, to keep alive the teachings of the founders. Each place the tower emerged, it followed a similar pattern. A hierophant or high priestess who is responsible for our leadership and guidance, anoints a group of archons to embody the principles and virtues of old Babylon. These archons take over themselves the duties assigned to them and shepherd the other Nosferatu. The Sebastocrator serves as advisor to Hierophants and Archons, bringing to them specialized knowledge so they can better serve in their roles. The tower is defended by groups of warriors who train night after night for their sacred role. For 2,000 years, everywhere, the tower worked to bring back the ways of our founders even without their guidance. Each Hierophant or High Priestess pore over all the lore about Babylon that could be salvaged from the times of chaos. During this time, the tower started to resemble each of the cities and people around the old world. There were as many towers as there were cities where Nosferatu dwelt, but every one of them was united into a single objective. This was the way of our kind until the court emerged and started our struggle for the soul of Nosferatu existence. A struggle that continues to this very day and has crossed over the ocean to the New World. Here in Dreadford, a tower was formed during the 18th century by an alliance of Nosferatu with the intent to expel the newly formed court from the city and take over it. In the beginning, we had only 3 houses with us. 3 Nosferatu who made their way from the old world here to Dreadford, accompanied by their children. My sire Andrei Dulka from House Dracul, Nineveh from House Strix, and your sire Gaius D. Lucius from House Basilisk. Not one of these original progenitors lived to this day. But as the struggle continued, new houses joined our cause. New Nosferatu came to our side and started their bloodlines. Beatrix van der Hoeven from House Irkala, Hector from House Leviathan, Oppenheimer from House Morrigan, Obve from House Horlock, Elsa from a different bloodline of House Dracul, Farah from House Moroi, Luke from House Agnus, and our current High Priestess from House Ashkari. As you can see, now we have more houses at our side than the wretched King's Court. We are on the cusp of ridding this city from their moral weakness and corruption. But we must not allow ourselves to grow arrogant and indolent, because yet still our victory lies at the other side of a hard-fought struggle. My purpose now, Antoinette, is to deliver from the fires of destruction as many of our kind as possible. There are those inside the King's Court who can listen to reason and be brought to our side.
I have heard some of this before, Preacher.
Why don't you come to one of the sermons?
I'll think about it.
They were interrupted by a young woman who entered the chamber smiling with glee.
Ivan, you can't wait to hear what news I bring from the inner bowels of the King's Court. Oh, you are busy.
As if there is something you don't know, Akasha.
I will have to tend to the intelligence report now, my dear.
Antoinette got up and left.
I am delighted to report that the whole Volkos assignment is complete. On another note, there is this new Nosferatu.
She amused herself by pondering how a strong Nosferatu like Ivan allowed such beliefs on folklore to besmirch his pragmatism. Maybe it had some use to motivate those who lacked the proper impetus. However, it could lead to valuable personnel spending so much time wondering about a long-dead and forgotten age. She would always keep her focus where it mattered, at the present and at what is yet to come. Tom Bridges got up and started to walk again through the sludge of the sewers. He had no recollection of how he came to be where he was, but it did not concern him. All it concerned him was how hungry he was. This dark void drilling on his soul, where at the bottom he felt an evil bat flapping its wings ravenously as it screeched with no end, asking for blood. He felt numb and cold, but it did not bother him, just like the lack of light did not bother his vision. He followed through the tunnel in a zombie-like state, and the further he went, the more of these clicking and popping sounds became more common, as if something prowled in the darkness. The sound did not raise any alarm for him. He continued moving forward. In a pitch-black chamber, the sound of something moving in for the kill was heard. A scuffle ensued with screams and roars for a minute or so. When Tom Bridges came out of the chamber, back into the power room, he was holding a monstrous arm. He sat down and sank his fangs on it. A couple of months later, above ground, Daniel met Eloise at the Dreadford Dam. She looked at the distance as he approached.
It's beautiful.
It is. But it is even more as the sun rises. It feels like you are inside of a painting.
I bet it does.
I heard you are the son of the Midnight Fiend.
I am.
He answered, admiring the view, and Eloise recited in jest.
Plead, plead, pray to have your soul cleaned. You can't run or be redeemed. You were taken by the Midnight Fiend.
Daniel looked shocked back at her.
What is that?
Something we sang when I was a child. He's been an urban legend in this city since the 50s. It was scary to learn he was real.
It's scarier than you think. His victims are very real. That song is just in poor taste.
Something that kept children in line, but I see where you come from. In this city, monsters are very real.
Julio's driver parked the car, but kept it running so the companions could get in.
Our ride is here,
Daniel said in a cold manner. As they approached the vehicle, Daniel's phone rang and he answered, listening for a moment and hanging up. Julio greeted them with a gesture, but Daniel had a sour expression on his face.
What is it?
The Midnight Fiend calls.
They cruised the city in silence until they reached the church. Eloise felt like she had crossed a line, but did not know how to bring the matter back in such a fashion that she could apologize for. She just met these people who saved her, and she was already driving a wedge between them. Julio was at a loss. He missed on the discussion and did not know what the Midnight Fiend was, but he could infer they were talking about Father Michael, although he had no idea why he would be called that way. Daniel, in his turn, was thinking about the monsters of Dreadford and how well they mingled among the unsuspecting public for decades. They met Father Michael on the steps of the church, and he was saying his goodbyes to some of his parishioners.
Yes, Betty, be sure to bring the sneakerdoodles for the children on Sunday. Homemade, don't try to fool us with something from the store. God is watching,
he said to one of his parishioners. She laughed in a joyous way as she left. Indeed, the monsters of Dreadford knew how to mingle among their prey. Father Michael took notice of Daniel and his crew arriving, and he signaled the back door. Daniel took them through the side of the church and they met him on the patio in the back.
Excellent, you have arrived. I can see you have a new addition to your crew. Hello, my dear, I am Father Michael.
Eloise, nice to meet you.
She answered awkwardly.
I think you are going to need a name for your little crew very soon. It helps a lot with fame and reputation in our society. Renown can open many doors.
Cut to the chase, Michael. What do you need?
Are we sensitive today?
Not at all, Midnight Fiend.
Daniel's reply made the place very silent. Father Michael's face betrayed him by showing not only his surprise of the remark, but some pain. It almost made Daniel feel bad about the way he treated his sire. Almost.
Well, since we are here only to discuss business, let's cut to it, shall we? Something of note happened. Spectre, the council member of House Orlock, has requested some assistance in dealing with a problem.
Why is it of note?
Because House Strix and House Orlock are enemies.
Rivals is a more precise word, I would say. But we all are united under the king, and so we shall help them.
For a price.
Of course. You need to take this explosive device to this address and detonate it. It's pretty straightforward.
He handed the device, a note and a map. Daniel took the note in his hands and read it.
This says it's in the sewers. How do we know this won't hurt anyone?
Spectre is a demolition expert. He knows what he is doing to avoid breaking the theater.
I'm talking about people.
We have to trust him. Now go, this should be quick.
Daniel and his companions departed, under the wicked gaze of the midnight fiend. In the car, Daniel was brooding in silence. The lights of the street illuminated inside from time to time. Julio thought about the mission. He was an engineer by trade, but had no practical experience with explosives. Eloise sat more comfortably in the back seat beside Daniel, still thinking on how to make amends, but Daniel's demeanor left no space for it. The car arrived at the destination, but the street was still crowded with couples having dinner and young folks bar hopping, enjoying the sweet taste of youth that in a glimpse of an eye would disappear from their lives.
Check it out, over there. That should be our entrance.
Eloise suggested, pointing to a manhole surrounded by safety barriers that read, Bridges Precision Builders.
Yes, but we should wait. There are too many people around here.
Sure. We should look for uniforms. The disguise will help us not attract unwanted attention and will give us the time for the streets to get less crowded.
Daniel offered, and they all agreed.
I can arrange that in a van. I used to work in an oil rig. Just give me a couple of hours.
Perfect, let's move.
They drove into a back alley, and Julio made some calls to Eugene, his uncle, one of the 4 remaining children of Van Arden. After a while, a white van arrived. They exchanged keys, and the driver of the van drove the car away. They put on navy blue jumpsuits and made their way to the manhole. Daniel got the crowbar and opened the cover, and the companions entered the sewers, leaving the familiar as a lookout inside the van. The place was covered by a foul stench. They used flashlights to illuminate the way. Although they could see perfectly at night in pitch-black darkness, they could see as much as any mortal. As they moved, rats and cockroaches got out of their way, hiding inside the cracks on the walls. At certain points, they walked through sludge and filth until they got to an open space that looked like it was under construction recently. They saw tools, carts, and old dirty clothes that probably were being used as rags that were left behind. There was a generator at one side and metal barrels next to it, some standing, others turned and rolled over. They all seemed to belong to the same company, Bridges Precision Builders. Whatever happened here, these people packed and left quickly. They kept following the map given by Father Michael until they reached a tunnel that took them deeper and deeper into the underworld. Finally, they reached a power room. The place looked like a war zone, and all 3 vampires could smell dry blood in the place. It is faint compared to fresh blood, but they knew it was all over the place. A battle took place here. Daniel walked around and found a toolbox opened laying on the floor, wrenches and screwdrivers littered around it. He searched inside and found a business card that said, Bridges Precision Builders, Thomas Bridges, Contractor. He looked around and he could see that at least 3 people were here, and what he guessed were 2 animals. He looked into the blood spatter patterns and deduced that someone was dragged to the end of the room, and there he found a huge crack on the wall that led to a tunnel.
I think this is what we're trying to blow.
He inspected the inside of the crack with the flashlight and compared it to his map.
What happened here?
Death.
Yes. Someone was dragged to the inside of this hole. It seems to go deeper underground.
He inspected some dry blood he found on the edges of the crack.
Look, someone was dragged out of the room too. Very injured, it seems.
Eloise pointed to fading footprints, made of dry blood as well, going out of the room.
He or she was probably trying to flee the fight.
Daniel inspected the footprints, pointed by Eloise.
Look. The person was injured on the left side, most probably. The footprints are from different footwear. So the person helping stepped on the blood with his right foot, and the injured one was stepping with his left foot.
My friends? What is this?
Julio illuminated a metal barrow that looked as if it was clawed by a creature of significant size. Eloise and Daniel got close to it for a better view. Suddenly, popping and clicking sounds started to echo through the tunnels.
I think we are about to find it now.
Something was moving fast in the darkness, and they could hear it fast approaching. They heard a ravenous scream, but before whatever could reach them, something dropped from the ceiling inside the opened tunnel. They heard the sound of a deadly fight. A man could be heard grunting inside the darkness that was outside the range of the flashlight. The scuffle ended with a sound of bone breaking and a roar. Suddenly, they could hear the sound of many creatures fast approaching, making clicking and popping sounds, growling and bellowing. From the hole, the figure of a man covered in a heavy and long raincoat, heavy boots and a hat jumped out, catching them by surprise. The figure pushed them out of the room in alarm and closed the heavy metal door behind them. His massive hands locked it by an improvised contraption that used a metal lever to block the door. They heard the creatures banging, the metal deforming from the blows. roars and snarls making shivers run up their spines.
Come, the door can't hold them for long.
The man led them through the tunnels back into the area with the abandoned construction, where he took them into a chamber that looked like it served as an administrative area for the construction. Old and dusty boards with work schedules hung on the walls, soiled paper littered the floors, and a punch clock laid broken on a corner. A medium-density fiberboard table sat dusty and dirty in a corner of the room. He signed for them to lay low and stay crouched.
Who are you?
More importantly, what are those?
Julio pointed back at the monsters, whispering as well. The figure shushed them.
Don't move or make a sound.
After a brief moment, they heard the popping and clicking sounds outside the chamber. It sounded as if they were scouting the place after them. They heard grunting coming from one place or another. The creatures were communicating. After a long while, the clicking and popping went away.
I think we are safe.
Are we?
Yes. They might come back, but usually they guard the entrance of the crack when not disturbed.
Give us some answers now, or I will beat them out of you. Who are you?
Eloise tried to intimidate the man, who in turn stood up 6.5 feet tall and not at all impressed. In the rush of the moment, none of them realized how big the man was.
I think we should all calm down and discuss this in a civilized manner.
He's Thomas Bridges, aren't you?
The man turned silent to Daniel, without confirming or denying it.
I noticed that you are still wearing your work boots. Your hands are rough from a life of hard construction work, and you know your way around these tunnels as if you spent a lot of time here. I found this card inside the toolbox in the power room. You are the owner of Bridges Precision Builders. That's why you know about this room. You used to spend a lot of time here?
He handed the card to Tom.
No, my brother did. He took care of the administrative and business side. I always preferred to be more hands-on with the work.
What happened to you?
Tom explained what happened in the power room many months ago, how the light went out, and he volunteered to fix it. When he got there, 2 figures were scrapping with the monsters. One of them got killed and dragged to the hole, the other he saved at the cost of his own life.
Then, one day I woke up here. Don't know how or why. I tried to go back up there, but when I got through the manhole, the sun burned me like fire. I came back, hurt, and after a while I got hungry, really hungry. The construction site was already abandoned. I found some leftovers, but could not eat them. Walking through the tunnels, I got jumped by one of the creatures. I killed it, and on instinct I fed on its blood. Have been doing that ever since. It's like I have become this blood-sucking monster.
Why didn't you go back there at night?
I did. I went to see my family, and on the way I saw myself in a window. I needed to see them so bad, my wife, my boy, but didn't have the courage to meet them.
He took off his hat, revealing a grotesque face, sharp teeth with huge pointing ears like a bat, eyes sunken with a long and pointing nose, with a languid and melancholic expression.
So I just watched them from far away. I came back and tried to live with the homeless, but one day I attacked one of them on instinct. Almost killed the guy. I was so hungry. They chased me away and I came back here.
They were all in silence.
I don't even know why I'm telling you this. I just feel...
We are the same. You are a vampire, Thomas, a Nosferatu. We all are.
Blood goes to blood.
It's not hard to believe now. I mean...
It shouldn't. Not after drinking all that monster blood like you did.
Tom laughed in a sad manner.
Why are you guys here anyway?
The 3 companions looked at each other. The mission they forgot.
Well, it's not as simple as you might imagine.
Daniel explained briefly what they were supposed to do, and how they were uncomfortable setting the bomb, since none of them knew if it could hurt the people and buildings around.
I can help you with that. I used to work for a demolition company, Trajan Demolitions, back in the day, before I started my own company.
Daniel handed the device, and Tom started to inspect it right away.
Why didn't you just blow the crack yourself to avoid the monsters?
Well, I was feeding on them, and also there is this phantom that is trying to kill me.
Phantom? What are you talking about?
There is this figure, draped in white grimy robes, a hooded fellow. He is after me for some time now, and the only place he avoids is inside the tunnels.
Vampires, werewolves, now ghosts.
Werewolves?
I don't know if he is a ghost. All I know is that he can become invisible and he carries a samurai sword. He came after me at least a couple of times and I got away by sheer luck.
The White Ronin? I've heard stories before. He roams the underworld fighting against the tower by himself. Why is he after you?
I don't know.
Maybe a cover-up? Thomas doesn't have a sire, and it is against the king's law to sire without authorization from the council.
It makes sense.
Here, I am done with it. This is not a bomb at all.
What? What do you mean?
There is no explosives, it's just a cool timer.
They were quiet for a moment.
He wanted to destroy you, Daniel. The monsters were supposed to do the job.
But don't save this. What do we do now?
We should leave, and Thomas, you should come with us.
Daniel was quiet, his chin supported by his hand with a finger covering his mouth in a pensive manner.
Daniel?
Daniel looked at him quiet.
Do you think Father Michael knew?
Eloise posited, making Daniel quietly turn to her.
Say something!
I'm thinking.
Think faster!
We were hired to do a job, and we are going to finish it. Thomas, you said you worked with demolitions. Do you think you can improvise an explosive to bring down that hole for good?
Hells yeah, I can.
Julio will cover us as we set the bomb, and Eloise will guard him.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, not for Spectre nor for Father Michael, but for the people up there. These monsters already destroyed Thomas's life. We can't let this happen again.
They agreed and started to work. Tom gave the idea to use the metal barrels of fuel for the generator to make the devices, and he would use the tools such as wrenches and screwdrivers left behind for shrapnel. Daniel assisted him throughout the endeavor. Eloise carried the barrels as they were ready, and Julio was acting as a lookout in case the monsters came back. After the barrels were ready, Tom took the point lead. He explained that he could navigate in pitch-black darkness like a bat. Before they left, Eloise approached Daniel somewhat embarrassed.
You know, since there is a chance that we could be destroyed by monsters in the sewers, I wanted to apologize for making light of the story of the Midnight Fiend. You were right. His victims are real, and I should have been more respectful, to them and to you.
Daniel smiled back at her, and she felt a little warm inside.
Water under the bridge, don't even think about it.
You are a cool guy, Daniel. You know, for a Strix.
You are not too bad yourself for a Volkos.
They went back to the power room as silently as possible. Tom scouted the room and ventured inside. He could detect the monsters, but they were far away. He signed to his companions that it was all clear and went back to position the barrels. Julio and Eloise took position, and Daniel started to connect the devices. As they worked cautiously, Eloise set the MDF table with the littered papers inside the tunnel beyond the hole so that Julio could set it on fire to form a flaming barricade in case the monsters attack. Everything was quiet. Julio had his attention fully on the tunnel to give cover to his friends. When out of thin air, he was attacked on the head by the blunt side of a katana. He fell to the ground unconscious. Tom heard the strike and turned and saw a phantasmagoric figure wearing a grimy white robe, luminous blood-red eyes shining inside the shadow of the hood that hid the contours of his face. He positioned himself in a fighting stance.
It's him.
He called for the attention of his remaining companions as he stood up. Daniel stood up as well, and Eloise joined them outside the hole. Silence stood still as they stared off each other. The gleaming red eyes of the White Ronin became evil slits, and he rushed with his sword ready for a blow pointing backwards. Eloise took the point to get on his way, but the attacker skillfully diverted by running on the wall. She tried to catch him but failed, allowing him to pass by her, jump from the wall and rain down a killing blow on Tom's head that would have destroyed him if it was not by Daniel pushing him out of the way in the last moment, using his eagle speed. The White Ronin grunted and by reflex hit Daniel with the butt of his sword, making the detective dizzy, falling to one knee on the floor, supported by his right hand. The swordsman turned again to Tom, but before he could strike him down, Eloise lifted a boulder using her hands and tried to smack it down on his back. The hooded figure dodged, but the attack was close, too close. He regained his feet, but Tom, who played football in high school, tackled him like a truck against the wall, cracking it. Dust flew high, but the blow did not deter the swordsman who, in sheer strength, got Tom away from him, pushing him against the barrels. Tom lost his balance and stumbled in one of the barrels, making him fall to the floor on top of it, making a resounding clang that reverberated through the tunnels. Everything stopped after the loud noise, and in the stillness, the sounds of ravaging creatures along with clicking and popping sounds came into a crescendo as a platoon of monsters fastly approached the room, hungry for blood. Julio recovered his consciousness, and Eloise helped him up. Daniel stood up, rubbing his head to appease the pain, and they all saw in awe the creatures approaching. Their knees trembled. The White Ronin strengthened his grip on his sword, and the monsters fast approached. The first to react was Julio. He took the lead as the others were still shocked, and with a rapid succession of hand movements along reciting his incantations, he pointed his hands to the MDF table and set it on fire along the papers that covered it. In the flash, they could see for a second the hideous creatures. Tom jumped for the device and in a rush finished the final details of the bomb. Daniel took the lead, opening the door, followed by Eloise and Julio, who evacuated as quickly as they could. Tom was next and Daniel was last. In desperation and ill time, Tom activated the device before the door could be properly closed. The explosion was terrifying, and Daniel, powered by his speed, saw it in slow motion. In a succession, one by one of the metal barrels inflated like balloons, an odd and bizarre occurrence that few are privy to testify to have observed. When the metal could not be displaced anymore, it was slowly torn like an ungodly fabric, making way for a torrent of flames and metal that dispersed to all sides of the room, followed by a burst of impact that ripped the door from the wall, which itself was brought down along. The impact also went up, reverberating through the ceiling and the structures above that could not resist the force, and came down upon the monsters and the opening, closing this foul gate to the underworld for good. Daniel was thrown against the wall at his back along the door, and like his companions, he lost conscience. The White Ronin had vanished, and after the explosion he appeared, safe and unscathed. He slowly approached Tom's body, step by step, raising his sword when he realized that although mortally injured, the man was already conscious again, his body trembling with terror and agony at the visage of the phantom that was ready to reap his eternity. Struggling and trembling, reached inside his coat, making his executioner stop in caution. He took out a photograph, himself, before being turned, his wife and son. He offered it to the White Ronin, who accepted cautiously.
Please, just grant me this last request.
The White Ronin stared at the photograph and looked at Tom in silence.
Please, tell my wife. I love her very much.
He grunted in pain.
And tell my boy, he is the best thing to ever happen to me.
He looked to the ceiling and closed his eyes, resigned to receive the killing blow without a fight. In his mind, a flash with his happiest moments passed by. He saw himself working and learning with his father, meeting his wife in high school and how beautiful she was when he picked her up for prom, his son being born, and the time he first held him in his arms, how the little one gripped his finger with strength, and his first football game. He saw his brother and the company they started and his crew that were family for him. Blood streaked his face, running down his hideous languid cheeks, staining the debris around him. But the blow never came. He opened his eyes and the White Ronin was gone. He stood there, laid on the floor, stunned for a moment, and slowly he got up and helped his new friends. One by one, he dug them out of the bricks and debris and took them to safety. After a while, they regained consciousness and checked on each other to make sure all of them were well. When they were sure, Tom made a request.
Guys, do you think you can help me move out of here? I don't know the rules for us, and I don't really know how to live this new eternity thing.
Of course, Thomas. Welcome aboard.
Daniel extended his hand.
My friends call me Tom,
he said, shaking Daniel's hand.
Welcome, Tom,
Eloise said, patting the man on the back.
Welcome, big fella.
On a faraway side of the underworld, the White Ronin came out in an intersection, and there waiting for him was Spectre, draped all in black, wearing a full combat military vest under an overcoat that sported a hood as well. His face covered by a smooth and glossy helmet with no distinct features. He had his hands joined at his back. His voice came out deep and modulated.
Why did you disobey my direct orders?
If you want to destroy him, do it yourself.
My patience is wearing thin with you, Giancarlo. Don't make me punish you.
The White Ronin strengthened his grip on his sheathed sword.
I don't think that's a good idea, Spectre.
Silence hung around the fetid air of the sewers as they stared at each other. After a moment, Spectre turned and proceeded to leave, and as he did, he said,
"Consider this mercy. There won't be a next time."
Father Michael was reading in silence in his chambers when he was startled by a noise coming from another room inside the church. Before going to investigate, he put away a small envelope inside his pocket. The priest found none other than his child, Daniel Reed, searching for something among his own belongings. The detective noticed the priest approaching and stopped his activity for a split second before returning to it.
Have you decided to finally move in as I offered?
No. I feel safer in my room in the motel.
You have learned a lot. I am very proud of what you have accomplished so far, my son. Nevertheless, you should listen to reason when I tell you are in a more vulnerable position out there.
Daniel did not respond.
Can you tell me at least what you are doing here?
I'm looking for some notes I might have left in here. Nosferatu politics and relationships are exhausting, and more than a little complicated.
I have taught you all about hunting and feeding and about our laws and how to keep yourself from being destroyed. But I have not told you anything about our origin and the history of the King's Court.
I don't have time for this. I am in the middle of something.
Isn't information vital to your trade? Do you think anyone else would be willing to share such knowledge with you at no cost? Maybe understanding the whole picture of the court will help you make sense of our politics, my son.
Daniel deliberated silently for a while.
Okay, I am all ears, just please. Don't start lecturing me on how to be a monster.
He said, sitting down facing his sire.
You probably have already met or at least heard about the tower. They are the old ways. They have existed since the dawn of Nosferatu history, and stipulated a lot of mythology to our origins. They believe in some grand scheme to the Nosferatu curse, and for millennia, they have behaved like a blood cult. To oppose the tower was to be alone and hunted. Our kind was stuck in a quagmire of contradictions, dark magic, and demonic worship. They were spread as far as our cursed blood could reach. But the age of the tower eventually would come to an end. The legend tells of a new House of the Blood, House Agnes, which emerged during the time of the Messiah. A Nosferatu from House Dracul was miraculously transformed by his blood and became the founder of this new house. How this happened exactly varies from one version to another. This new founder was exempt from several aspects of our curse. It is said that he worked miracles and terrified the elder Nosferatu of his time by the unique state of his condition. When the Agnes founder brought new people into the blood and they shared his powers, it was considered heresy to the old ways. Nonetheless, many eager to escape the curse went into pilgrimage to meet and be made like him. Unfortunately, he was incapable of doing so. Embroiled in superstition and myth, those who were desperate started to sacrifice holy men and women, using their blood to try and replicate the miracle that gave birth to House Agnes. Those were dark times for people of faith. The tower was appalled by these events. Fearing to lose their grip onto power, they hunted this new family with all their might and hate, pouring their resources and intelligence into finding a way to eliminate the rift in Nosferatu society created by House Agnes. Like a Greek tragedy, the more blood they spilled in this cause, the more Nosferatu realized the error of the old ways. What followed was inescapable. One night, Carolus, a young man who was said to be virtuous above the many, was brought into the blood of House Agnes by its founder. And he decided to fight back to protect his brothers and sisters, but above all else, to forge a different path for our kind. Carolus spoke of the importance of clinging to our mortal soul and rejecting the monster inside each of us. Moreover, he went on to take up arms and slowly bring order to a troubled landscape. This Nosferatu managed to assemble others from each house, and they joined him in his battle. The tower fought back fiercely, but this was the first time it could not put down the rebellion against its bloody ways. The tower raised dark knights, sorcerers, and monsters and sent them against the rebels, but each of them failed. They persecuted Carolus and his entourage everywhere. But through bravery and great personal sacrifices, the rebels won victories and gained ground. New supporters joined them night after night as stories about miracles and the virtue of the rebels spread. They accuse the tower, in their beliefs, of being an excuse for indulging the worst vices of Nosferatu nature and practicing devil worship. The rebels crowned their leader, Carolus, a king, and he organized his associates into a round table, where each knight represented one of the houses. A folk hero was chosen as paladin of House Leviathan. A liberator was chosen as paladin of House Strix. A magician was chosen as paladin of House Dracul. A duelist was chosen as paladin of House Ashkari. A midwife was chosen as paladin of House Basilisk. A reformed criminal was chosen as paladin of House Panthera. A wanderer was chosen as paladin of House Morrigan. A priest was chosen as paladin of the House Irkala. A sailor was chosen as paladin of House Orlok. A sower was chosen as paladin of House Volkos. A healer was chosen as paladin of House Moroi. A king was chosen as paladin of House Agnes. In the year 500 AD, there was a terrible battle. At one side, the tower was led by their high priestess, a vicious sorceress, and her most trusted archon as her Black Knight. While at the other, Carolus led his round table. The rebels won, and the tower was reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. This was known henceforth as the Second Fall. The early Middle Ages had given birth to a new path for our kind, the King's Court. It set in place rules and morals to set us apart from monsters. The King's Court hinged on the idea of valuing whatever shreds we still had from our human existence before the long night. We would stay close to anything that could help us to resist our Nephilim as hard as we could. The court banished the nightmares of old and powerful Nosferatu. From ages past were destroyed. Those who survived were the ones who hid, resigning themselves to sleep. The victors of the battle against the tower went into anonymity, ready to intervene should its threat once again become dire. The Round Table worked behind the scenes to help the court spread everywhere. Soon, almost all Nosferatu had forgotten about Babylon and the old ways, and were more worried about their mortal soul fiefdom and liege. The general structure was more or less the same we have today. The king would rule as a protector of the customs and laws, together with a council that would ensure the rest of the Nosferatu had representation and participation into the process of rulership. The great nobles are the dukes, which have a vote in the king's council. The lesser nobles are the counts and barons, which receive small domains to protect and manage. One special case is the marquise, which usually receives a diplomatic or strategic role, be it either dealing with the other supernatural creatures which share this world with mortals and Nosferatu, or keeping the political stability and peace inside the king's court. The king nominates a paladin or shire reaver to be responsible for enforcing his decrees and laws. Here in Dreadford, we go with shire reaver. You may have heard of Bartholomew. The reaver is assisted into his duties by the horseman. I am myself a count, and the second in line of our faction in House Strix. The only one ahead of me is Dupont, who is a duke. It all was set up to work like a charm, but deterioration seems to be inescapable. Everything that Nosferatu dare to touch rots. There are whispers about the Round Table no longer being united, or maybe even existing at all. The tower was rebuilt mysteriously. Some say that it represents inevitable facets of our existence, and that it will return as long as our kind remains. Others ascribe its return to direct influence from other worldly masters. But the theory I like the most is the Round Table split, and one or more of its knights turned against it, betrayed the rest, and are responsible for the old enemy's rebirth.
What happened to the first king?
Who knows if he ever existed, my son? Maybe there was a noble, virtuous king who assembled a group of knights to fight the tower. Or maybe this legend was created to serve as a self-aggrandizing tool for lords and ladies drunk with power.
You really don't like admitting you don't know something, don't you, Michael? What about House Agnes? I have never heard about it. Do we have any of them here in this city?
What do you think, my son? As if something holy would have anything to do with our kind in this wretched city.
If all these stories are just ancient myths and fairy tales, how did the court start here in Dreadford?
The King's Court of Dreadford was started by a group of Nosferatu who arrived with their brood during the 18th century. Abrantes from House Volkos, Francis Stephen from House Dracul, Justine de la Chapelle from House Strix, Maastricht from House Orlok, Adelaide from House Morrigan, the Hermit from House Leviathan, Lodewijk van der Hoeven from House Irkala, and the Betrayer from House Ashkari, whose name was erased from history.
I've never heard these names. Wait a minute, you said one of them was called the Betrayer. I think the Shire Reaver was saying something like that to Van Arden.
They formed the previous council, the first council this city ever had. Each of them served as duke, with one of them, the Betrayer, ruling as king, thanks to him being the most powerful among them. Within a few decades, they succeeded in putting together a fairly powerful king's court. Soon after, the Tower arrived and challenged them for control of the city. The contest between the King's Court and the Tower was brutal, but the King's Court was able to repel the Tower and kept most of Dreadford to itself. This assured a century of prosperity and peace, during which we flourished, as did the city and the mortals who lived here. Unfortunately, in the last decade of the 19th century, the unthinkable happened. The king himself allied with the Tower, and in an act of betrayal, they descended upon the court like vultures. During a single night, the king murdered each of the dukes while the Tower invaded the city. Only one member of the council survived that fateful night: Francis Stephen of House Drackle, our current king. He led the counterattack, and in the struggles that followed, managed to defeat and kill the Betrayer, while the leaders of the Tower fled in retreat. Francis Stephen was crowned as Your Serene Highness. He nominated a duke for the council from each house among the Nosferatu, who most valiantly fought for our victory. The house of the Betrayer was purged, and our present Ashkaris are from another bloodline. They have nothing to do with the Betrayer, but are still targeted with a lot of suspicion. House Urkala and all its members disappeared during the tumultuous nights of the Great Betrayal. One house was found guilty of having colluded with the Betrayer, House Morrigan, which was sentenced with royal censure and had its members punished for their crimes. Not many of them are left nowadays. As soon as all this was over and the new King's Council was established, the new king retired into a secluded and discreet lifestyle. He rules the city through the council to this very day.
So you were saying Dupont is some kind of war hero? I would never have guessed it.
The same as each of the sitting dukes of the council. They are children from the first Nosferatu of their house to arrive here, sons and daughter of the original Council of Dreadford, regrettably lost during the Great Betrayal. Well apart from Van Arden, as I said, he and his brood, which arrived at a later time to the city. They helped the hunt for the remaining members from the previous House Ashkari until none were left. After that, he petitioned the council to join it as duke, and it was decided to grant him his request.
And why would a king do that? Why would he turn against his own court?
They say he was driven to madness by the dogma of the Tower, but not much is known about him anymore. His name and history were excluded from the official records as punishment for his crimes.
Michael, where were you during all this?
Well, I think that is enough history for tonight, my son. I am tired and the sun is coming up any minute now. Rest well. I hope you have good luck with your current endeavor.
The priest retired to his quarters, leaving Daniel to his suspicions alone. He had a lot to chew on now. Daniel returned to his search for his notebook and found it.
I have no intention to count on luck.
Oliver left his mansion at Dreadford Heights and walked into his garage in a hurry. He checked his watch and confirmed he was still on time. In his car, he found a trade card, an ancestor of the more commonly known business card, resting on the driver's seat. He took it and saw the card was in mint condition, even though it could be from the 19th century. It had a general store name on it, Sunrise Emporium, with an old-style logo. He thought it strange because he had never seen it before. It would have to wait because he had more pressing matters. With no hesitation, he pocketed the card and drove off. Hidden in the shadows, someone observed him.
The hook is set. He took the bait. Now all that is left is a little nudge.
A feminine figure said into a small comm device before vanishing into the night. Whoever saw Oliver passing by could never guess his harsh upbringing. His family was poor and his father was an alcohol abuser who was violent toward his mother. When he was a young teen, he started to rub elbows with gangsters, but his father owed a lot of money to some shady characters and paid with his life. That was a wake-up call. Soon he excelled in school, sports, anything that could give him an edge. He worked minimum wage and put himself through business school. Finally, his dream came true and he landed a job in the financial sector. There he showed he had a knack for managing people and making hard decisions. But what made him come to Nicholas C. Graham's notice, the company owner, was the internet. Oliver was more than an enthusiast, he was a believer. The World Wide Web would change the world, and Oliver knew it. He had to make sure Nicholas knew it as well. Through perseverance and tenacity, he got his 47 seconds elevator pitch with the owner, and that was enough to escalate into discussions, presentations, and reunions that went long into the night. On one of these nights, Nicholas offered him an executive position responsible for modernizing the company, to bring it to the age of the internet. Nonetheless, the job came with an odd caveat. Nicholas explained that there was one thing particularly dissimilar about him. He was a Nosferatu, a vampire to be simply put. At first, Oliver laughed, believing it to be a prank, but the seriousness in the eyes of the CEO made him doubt himself. Nicholas reiterated his offer, promising an ungodly amount of money, power, and eternal life. Believing Nicholas to be an eccentric billionaire, as they are not uncommon, Oliver accepted. What could be the worst thing to happen in indulging the man? Third terror never left Oliver's eyes, as he lay dead in the checkered marble floors. The last thing reflected in his eyes were the fangs of his sire. The smell of iron lifting through the air along the spray of blood that came from his neck would forever stain his memory every time he would have to consume the life of another from this night forward. Since he was a member of the ruling house, Oliver was weary of getting ripped off by other Nosferatu, who constantly bothered him for favors. So he cautiously studied vampiric politics, relationships, and family trees. He learned about their history and famous personalities, even though he dealt more with the mortal aspect of the business. Back to the present, Oliver was relaxing on his presidential office chair, while perusing financial reports on the screen of his computer. The matter of the suspicious trade card intruded once or twice more into his mind, briefly only to be pushed aside again by the heavy workload when he heard his door opening. It was Nicholas.
Have you finished with the reports?
Yes, Nick. I am satisfied with the yield performance, but looking into the sheets, I am sure we can make things smoother.
Good. I'm going home. Don't stay here until the sun rises. It would be a scene if the morning staff bumped into you sleeping.
Oliver remembered the time he had almost let this very situation happen, if not for his sire's timely intervention.
You know, looking at you, I cannot help but remember my own sire, Elsa. She spent long hours poring over the balance sheets and company documents. I learned a lot from her.
It's a shame she is gone, Nick. I know how much she meant to you, and I still think you should investigate this matter further.
Oliver, I already told you we lost her to a disaster more than a century ago. I was away from the city when it all happened.
What about the king? Was he involved in a disaster as well?
Francis Stephen was already rarely present in the city before his coronation. For decades, he was seen in Dreadford barely once a year. I admit that occasionally I ask Holloway for an audience with the king, but it is never granted. All matters directed to him are forwarded to the council.
Not even personal visits?
No. It is said he is unavailable.
Don't you find this odd, Nick?
I guess once you become king, you can indulge yourself to the point of eccentricity. Either way, we should focus on our business and not go looking for problems in the dark.
Nicholas turned to go away, but was interrupted again by Oliver.
Speaking of our business, our company was started by your sire Elsa, was it not?
Nicholas looked back to his child and checked his watch before turning once again to Oliver.
Yes, she was quite the businesswoman, a genius with numbers I have not seen matched. She used to buy a lot of failed businesses and turn them profitable. I had been brought into the blood to help her the same as I did with you. After we lost her, I returned to the city and inherited it all. We have grown a lot since, but I keep close to heart what she has passed down to me.
Well, Nick, don't go getting destroyed. I am not close to being ready to manage this whole business.
It is not in my plans, but it would be great if you stopped getting distracted with gossip and focused on the tasks at hand.
The young executive chuckled, and his sire went away for the night. Oliver heated some blood in the microwave and left when the coming morning was around the corner. He always preferred driving himself. He could never feel at peace with a driver knowing his schedule. He had heard his fair share of stories involving betrayal and backstabbing among the Nosferatu. As usual, he awoke as soon as the sun went down. Nosferatu, who were very recently brought into the blood, were early risers among the damned. Waking up from the vampiric slumber was very different from mortal sleep, more akin to having your powers returned, no longer kept away by the light, as if the creatures of darkness were once again permitted to roam and corrupt the night. The young executive was getting ready to go out when his phone rang. No number was displayed on the screen. He toyed with the idea of not picking the call, but only for a second. When he answered, he heard muffled voices. 2 women were speaking, but he could not understand it clearly.
Oliver's phone. State your business.
He was ready to hang up the call when a name caught his attention.
He is worried about your supermarkets, Elsa. They are working at peak performance. Hiccups are expected and accounted for during the planning stages of any well-drawn operation. The solutions are already in place. On the matters of blood output, Hector is going to have his demands met on the agreed date and time. Precisely. Well, you seem to have it all figured out, so I'm going to pass the good news along to him. Tell me, Elsa, don't you feel tired of never coming out of this office? Working all the time, never going out and enjoying your eternity?
The call dropped. Oliver could not believe his ears. He spent several seconds looking at his phone. He could not dial back to the number. Maybe he should have someone with the proper expertise look into it and try to understand better what just transpired. He drove lightning fast to the skyscraper downtown, where House Dracul conducted its night-to-night operations, the pride and joy of his house, Dreadford Tower, or the Fang, as it was known amongst the vampires of Dreadford. The glass and steel structure, 1889 feet high, bit the sprawling metropolis at the heart of downtown Dreadford, in its financial district, where Oliver and his sire worked. As soon as he arrived, he asked for the familiar at his service to call Nicholas, but his sire was off at a meeting. When he arrived at his office, there was a delivery package waiting for him, something that had arrived during the day. Oliver was startled by what he found inside, a supermarket bag from Sunrise Groceries. He took the card from inside his pocket, and it had the same logo and name, only it was modernized, saying Groceries instead of Emporium now. Someone was messing with him. He asked his familiar for any information about the delivery, and who made it to be sent his way, but that would take some time. He decided to go to the board meeting room and try to take some minutes of the Duke's attention. Jacob Holloway was the acting leader of the house in the name of the king and represented it on the council. It was a rare event for him to go upstairs. No familiars are allowed, and only the eldest among the Nosferatu have an office on the highest floors of the Fang. The house has some periodic boardroom meetings that Oliver attended, but apart from these occasions, he was never summoned to the top floors, thanks to his young age as a member of House Dracul. The elevator doors opened with a ring when he arrived. The corridor was pristine and had a faint smell of lavender. Oliver could almost see his reflection on the marble that made up the floor. From the windows, he was able to see the city under him, like he was a god atop of Olympus. He directed himself to the waiting area outside the boardroom. There, a huge painting covered an entire wall from the ceiling to the floor. It depicted a blonde man with long hair that fell to his back, with an amicable smile standing behind 3 sitting people. His right hand was on the shoulder of one of them, a brunette woman exuding confidence and charm. The man's other hand rested on the shoulder of another, a blonde woman looking a little younger and shy. The third person at the side of the 2 women was an old man, who looked proud to anyone who stood before the painting to admire it. Written near the painting were the names of the people depicted on it: Francis Stephen, Drusilla Morris, Jacob Holloway, and Elsa York, the king and his 3 children.
There you are, Your Highness. And Elsa as well.
He heard voices and noise coming from the boardroom. He approached the door and knocked on it, and without waiting for any answer, he opened the door of the Dragon's Den, as the boardroom was known. The creme de la creme of House Dracul was there. The Duke, Jacob Holloway, also known as the Old Dragon, was sitting at the head of the long table, and standing up at his side, it was Steve Corse, his right hand, an old slumlord that now dominated the real estate business. Sitting at the Old Dragon's right side was his son Edmund Stone, also known as the Mad Dragon. Sitting at his left side was his son's rival Salvatore de' Medici, also known as the Red Dragon, along other lesser-known counts and barons. They all stopped talking the moment Oliver entered the room and stared at him. A smell of blood permeated the whole place. Human blood.
Sir, sorry to interrupt.
And what is the reason for this interruption, child?
I have some information you should know, sir, and some questions too.
You should look for my familiar for these matters. Do not...
It pertains to your sister Elsa. I believe she is alive.
The elder Dracul let the silence hang a little before speaking again.
Please, forgive me. Give us the room. This won't take long.
The other Nosferatu got up and left the board meeting room, leaving him alone with Holloway.
How is Nicholas, my nephew, doing? Does he have anything to do with this?
Holloway asked, getting comfortable on his chair.
No, sir. He is all right. He is out of office, meeting some investors and closing a deal with some suppliers. He does not have anything to do with the matters I want to speak with you, sir. Not yet.
And you are coming to me before going to your sire? Have you seen a ghost? You said my sister is alive. Well, as much as any of us can be said to be alive.
Yes, sir. I have reasons to believe it. Or that someone is trying to make me believe it.
My sister was destroyed, Mr. Oliver. She died during the times of the Great Betrayal. Both of them did, Drusilla and Elsa. My older sister didn't leave any children, but we were lucky that Nicholas was away from the city and survived. Why do you believe that anything different transpired, child?
Sir, I found a trade card inside my car. After that, I received a pocket dial, 2 women talking, and one of them was called Elsa, and they mentioned a supermarket. And last, I received a delivery with this bag from the same market. Can you make sense of any of it, sir?
If what you speak is true, this should be brought to the king's attention as soon as possible. But first, we need to understand if what you say is not some kind of twisted scheme. Let's not waste your Serene Highness's time. I'm going to get to the bottom of this situation, Mr. Oliver. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. Leave here the card, the bag, and your cell phone so they can help the investigation I am going to launch.
But sir...
And do it fast. I have other matters to attend to. If you hadn't noticed, I was having a meeting when you barged into the room. A meeting I intend to continue.
Oliver did not want to do what Holloway demanded, but he complied anyway. He did not know if it was some kind of supernatural compulsion or only dread that made him do it. He left the room without the items and with a promise that he would be informed if the investigation reached anything of note. Holloway gave him clear instructions to leave the matter alone until further notice. Instructions Oliver did not plan to obey. While he waited for the elevator to arrive, he heard someone approaching him.
Don't ever think about doing something like that again, Mr. Oliver. Next time you are going to direct any request through me. Is that understood? Said
Jennifer, Holloway's secretary and familiar.
Yes, Jennifer, I just thought that he would...
Who cares about what a child thinks? We have rules and protocols, Mr. Oliver. They are what keep us above beasts. You either follow them or prepare to face the consequences. Your thoughts and feelings be damned.
Before Oliver could answer, the doors to the elevator opened. He excused himself and entered, leaving the woman behind. Jennifer was only a familiar, but she was Holloway's familiar, which made her more politically powerful than many Nosferatu. Of course, he could snap her neck like a twig, but he would have to answer to her master, and the old dragon was not to be contended with. After what transpired, the young executive could not concentrate on his work. He feared he was becoming obsessive, but he did not like being messed with, and he was sure something very fishy was going on. He kept researching about Sunrise Groceries on the internet. He discovered that it was one of the businesses left by Elsa to Nicholas, but it was sold around the turn of the 20th century because it was going bankrupt. Around midnight, his secretary asked him if he had free time for a meeting with his sire. Within minutes, Oliver entered his sire's office, visibly relieved. Nicholas's room was immense. At the end of the room stood his desk near a full-wall window. Some couches were at a corner around a table for some more relaxed conversations. His sire stood with the back turned to Oliver. He was gazing at the city, standing close to the window.
Oliver, are you all right? I received some concerning news about you.
Nicholas said, still looking at the night lights of the city.
Nick, I don't know what is happening. You have to believe me, something is very out of place.
Nicholas turned to his child and pointed at the couches.
Okay, Oliver, tell me everything.
Both men took their places, and Oliver explained the recent events.
Nick, I think your sire is alive, or someone who knows the story is trying to convince us that she is. Holloway even said that the king should be informed.
Oliver, that's a bizarre tale indeed. Unfortunately, I am sure my sire do not walk among us. It is possible that some kind of deception is at play here, but I want you to remember one thing, my son. Our blood, Dracul blood, is prone to instability when we allow ourselves to drift away from a stern and focused path. Our Nephilim, the dragon, is powerful and unwavering. It keeps battering inside our souls, and if we feed it, it will feed upon us entirely.
Oliver felt betrayed for having his intuition be confused by madness. It happened every time he had a visionary idea. People would laugh at him, but he thought Nicholas was different. He said nothing and let his sire continue.
I have seen Holloway put down more than one member of House Dracul who were showing early symptoms of the madness, and he goes through great lengths to keep his son from succumbing to it. Do not let this turn you into a deranged lunatic. If he said he would get into the bottom of it, give him some time. I know Holloway is, shall we say, difficult, but your soul may be at stake here. Maybe the whole transition from mortal to Nosferatu is being too hard on you.
Nick, you don't understand.
Why don't you take some days off and rest a little? Maybe practice some hobby.
Nick, I need to know what is behind this.
If Holloway turns out empty-handed and these bizarre events do not stop, I give you my word that I will find out who is responsible for it all. But right now it seems to me someone is trying to bait you into falling to the dragon. Let it rest. Go home and take some days off.
I am telling you, Nick.
It's an order, not a request. See you next week, partner.
It pained Nicholas to do that, but he felt like he had no choice. Oliver didn't try to retort. He got up and went home. As he drove back to his mansion, he was already musing on how he could continue his investigation by himself, and he knew how. A contact in House Ashkari told him about a young Nosferatu from House Strix who was quite the detective, and he was taking cases for gold. One, Daniel Reed. So he arranged a meeting at Dreadford's public library.
Mr. Reed, I might not be as important as some of your clientele, and I fear this case may be dangerous, but if you help me, I can assure you I am going to reward you all handsomely.
The four Nosferatu talked quietly among themselves before answering.
You piqued our interest, Mr. Oliver. What can we do for you?
Oliver explained everything that has transpired until now, and the companions listened intently.
I want to understand what is happening and if my grandsire is alive. And if not, who is sending these clues to me and why? I need somebody to help me through this nightmare. My sire thinks I am going mad.
Okay. I have a lot to chew on. Let me think a bit, and meanwhile you can get acquainted with my associates.
Daniel stepped aside to review his notes, and Eloise approached him quietly.
I think we don't want to go anywhere near this.
Why would you say that?
That guy is Nicholas C. Graham's child. He is a direct descendant from the king.
You mean the mysterious king? Who should be sitting on the empty throne at the amphitheater?
She nodded in confirmation, and Daniel took a good look at the man whose blood was the king's own.
Excuse me, Mr. Oliver, but your grandsire, Elsa, is she a child of the king?
An eerie silence took over the room.
Yes, she is.
I am not going to let you down, Oliver, but I am not going to force anyone to get involved with this case.
I am not going to leave you in the lurch, Daniel. I believe we have better chances in this wretched city if we stick together.
If you think we can solve this, I won't back down now, but we have to be careful.
Everyone looked to Julio, who was deep in thought, his hands touching each other by the digit of the fingers.
Of course I'm in. I was wondering, Mr. Oliver, have you ever tried uncovering who's the owner of this supermarket?
I tried searching for this info. It used to belong to us. It was almost going bankrupt, so we sold it, and it was acquired by someone who turned the situation around. Regrettably, I can't uncover who the owner is. I found a corporate maze of holdings and investment funds. The same way Nicholas and myself organize our business. Too close to home, if you ask me. I may be able to uncover the way around the maze, but it will take time.
Do you think we could have a talk with your sire?
Unfortunately, we can't. He asked me to drop the case and let Holloway do the investigation instead. I am acting without his approval or knowledge.
Our best way forward is to find out who sent the card in the bag. Can I take a look at them?
Holloway confiscated them both along with my cell phone. I don't believe he will allow us to have them back.
We have no leads.
It would be naive of us to believe this is by accident. Someone is trying to cover up the truth.
What about the package that was used to send you the bag? Do you still have it?
Yes, it was the only thing Holloway did not ask for.
It can be useful. Let me have it.
Oliver opened a suitcase and gave it to Daniel, who used his senses, displacing them to the past. He saw a man preparing the package with a bag from Sunrise Groceries inside. He was clearly a familiar, the smell of vampiric blood all over him. It reminded the detective of the vampire who held Christina hostage. He too could smell vampiric blood on her. His senses were getting sharper, The room was not what could be expected from a delivery service. It was run down, dark, and almost empty. He looked around and found a window. He concentrated hard and he could see the street outside and recognized it.
I know from where the package was sent to you, Mr. Oliver. We are going to give it a visit.
Daniel and his group were leaving the room when they noticed Oliver coming with them.
What? I want to get to the bottom of this. No way I am staying behind.
The young executive offered to drive and take them in his SUV. The night was dark, and a persistent rain fell from the sky while they crossed the city. One of the positives about living only at night was that Nosferatu only rarely were stuck in traffic.
So you and the other Nosferatu of House Dracul are in the dark about the king too? I always thought you guys knew the secret, since you are all from the same house.
If there is some kind of secret, I am not part of it. I am not close to the older Nosferatu of the house, apart from my sire. I think the leader of the house particularly dislikes me.
Yeah, I know how you feel. The leader of my house doesn't like me either.
At least you know the leader of your house. I was turned and left behind. I never asked for this. I should have listened to that goddamn manual.
Daniel looked to Tom and wondered if any other of the Nosferatu accompanying them were turned against their will. He remembered how he himself was forced into becoming a vampire. This world of blood and death usually did not bother asking if you wanted to be part of it, but there were exceptions. Julio told him that he accepted becoming a Nosferatu as part of a deal to help his wife. Daniel wondered about Eloise's transformation, but she rarely spoke of her past.
We are here.
They exited the vehicle. Daniel had his stake at hand, Eloise and Tom were empty-handed, Julio had his cane and Oliver took out a shotgun from the trunk. They were in front of an old building, windows barred and the peeling paint looked dingy and decrepit. The doors leading to the inside of the building were surprisingly open. Someone had forced their way in. The 5 Nosferatu cautiously entered the building. A muffled scream came from somewhere inside. When they entered, they saw what appeared to be a massacre. There was blood everywhere. Once again, they heard a scream and the sound of struggle, followed by several shots being fired. They did not waste any second and rushed to the direction of the sound of the guns. They found 4 men armed to the teeth in tactical gear and covered by shadows. Daniel saw a grotesque Nosferatu biting the neck of a man with malice. The Nosferatu pointed to Daniel and his companions and swiftly left the room by a corridor. The men started to shoot. Eloise took point covering her allies, taking several shots while Tom took hold of a table and threw it against the men, making them scramble their positions. Oliver cocked the shotgun and passed by Eloise. Shots grazed his face and body, and some hit him full force, but he took it all without wincing, discharging the weapon against their foes, like a modern knight getting into the battlefield.
I'm going after the Nosferatu. Take care.
Daniel saw the long corridor before him and felt the emotions of the fleeing Nosferatu flooding through it. He felt like a cornered rat caught red-handed. As he advanced, he noticed Julio following behind, limping with his cane.
Are you sure you are all right, Julio?
I can manage. Let's go!
The two followed the fleeing Nosferatu to a door that stood ajar. Daniel and Julio entered it, and inside they found an old storeroom. Several boxes filled the chamber and there were no windows.
Damn it, he is here, I can feel it.
As they approached the boxes, they heard the sound of the door they just entered closing and locking from outside. Something heavy was swiftly dragged to the other side before they could return to the door.
Locked shut.
Daniel tried his best, but the door wouldn't budge.
I think we...
Julio was interrupted by an explosion inside the room with them. An incendiary device had gone off. By reflex, Julio let go of his cane, using an incantation to shield him and Daniel. It took staggering effort from him, and he felt his blood burning like fuel inside his veins as his hands trembled. Daniel was stunned watching the old engineer holding the explosion from engulfing them.
I can't hold it much longer. You have to find a way out.
Daniel was awakened by his companion's words. Everything seemed to pass slowly to him. He tried the door once again, but with no result. He looked for another door, but the room had none. No windows either. He started searching the ceiling for some escape route, but there was none. Before the firestorm caused by the explosion could finally engulf them, Tom punched his way through the walls, grabbing his companions as Eloise got in the way of the fire, absorbing it all. The fire ripping ashes from her skin and burning her dead flesh. She fell to the floor and they did not know if she would turn to ashes at any moment and be destroyed. Daniel took her in his arms and they scrambled their way off the building. The fire was quickly spreading everywhere. Oliver screamed at them, pointing the way out, holding the door open, and they left just in time before more harm could come to them. Daniel put Eloise down, screaming her name, trying to wake her up. Oliver ran to the car, and from the trunk brought a blood bag and gave it to him, who in his turn ripped a gash on it and poured the contents in her mouth. Some of her wounds healed, and she opened her eyes, coughing.
Hey there, stranger.
Daniel fell back, laughing in relief. He looked at Julio, who was exhausted and looked thirsty. The detective offered the rest of the contents to the magician, who accepted.
We better leave before the cops get here.
Daniel helped Eloise to get up, and they went back to the car and left the scene behind.
Why would the tower get involved in this? What do they have to do with Elsa and your case, Mr. Oliver?
They were not from the tower, Julio. After you and Daniel left and we handled the shooters, I interrogated one of them. He confessed they worked for House Orlock. They were from the court.
The 5 vampires stood silent for a while.
Right now we need to patch up. I have a blood stash I traded for gold in Michael's church. We should go there.
I thought you were staying in the motel.
I am, but the church is safer for this kind of stuff. It also keeps Michael pleased because it gives me a reason to come by.
What about the agents from House Orlock?
We should keep this very quiet for now. Oliver is in danger. I think you should stay with us and take the time to uncover that corporate maze. Maybe some identities from the staff of the supermarket too.
Perhaps you are right, but it could put you in danger as well, and I don't want that.
Are you ready to forget about this case and let it go?
No. I may not know what it is, but I know I am onto something. I am going to uncover it, find proof, and burn the hell of the people responsible for this mess. I just don't want others becoming targets because of me.
You will not get it done alone, Oliver. We should let things cool down for a while, and you should stay out of sight. When the opportunity arises, we can get back into the case. Together. I am not one to leave a case unsolved. Whatever it takes.
I am at a loss for words, Mr. Reed. Thank you.
They stopped by the church and went inside by the back door. The detective went ahead to talk with his sire, while the others waited. Father Michael was sitting at his desk writing something, and as soon as Daniel arrived, he closed it and raised his face to him.
My child, what brings you here tonight? You looked like you went to hell and back.
Michael, I have my associates here, but we won't stay long. We just need time to recover. I'll use the blood I stashed here. We won't cause any trouble.
All right. As I said, it pays for us to have things prepared for hard times beforehand, doesn't it? It is good you decided to spend your gold wisely.
Daniel felt a little angry for being patronized, but kept quiet.
I am sorry, but I can't go and meet your crew. I am a little busy tonight, but take your time with them. You have my blessings.
Daniel turned to leave, but stopped mid-movement.
I remembered something. You told me that me and my companions should find a name for our crew. Considering you insist on calling me a son, I talked with them, and they all agreed with the name I suggested. We are looking into who we need to speak with in the King's Council to make it official.
And what would that name be, my child?
The Midnight Fiends.